came to read Guissani rather, many years into my career as a professor, where I've been teaching for a long time. I began to read Guissani after finishing a 3-year project on philosophy of social science. So my formal training is in psychology and sociology. And I did an entire project trying to talk about philosophy of the human person in the social sciences. And what I encountered again and again was that philosophy of the human person in the social sciences really wanted to stop at psychology. It didn't really want to talk about the soul. It didn't want to talk about transcendence. It didn't want to talk about mystery. And it didn't want to talk about any kind of truth that couldn't ultimately be subjected to the scientific method, right? So everything about the human person that we should say should be subject to the scientific method. And that seemed to me to be really incongruent with human experience, because humans have experiences. They have mystical experiences. I've interviewed young adults who've never set foot in a church who feel that they've experienced God somehow. There's a rise in Buddhist meditation and mindfulness and depth psychology. People are talking in the language of the soul. That's really just not in psychology and sociology anymore. And so I started to wonder, why is there no soul in the social sciences? And reading the history of modern philosophy really opened up a lot of my eyes to see that a lot of the modern social sciences that I've studied, for all the good that they do, tried to claim that everything we need to know about the human person can be subjected to the scientific method. And all of this stuff about tradition and creeds, all of that is sort of a quaint artifact. Maybe we should just get rid of it. And then Guissani, I found to be actually trying to rediscover or provide a language to think about the human person as open to mystery, and as experiencing God in some direct way, while also upholding that there is an authority to the tradition, right? And I think in The Risk of Education, which is a short book, I really recommend anybody who's interested in either education or just a better understanding of the human person read Risk of Education. What Guissani is doing there is trying to lay out a method of education that's very attuned to human experience. And he makes this rather provocative claim that even the creeds of Christianity should be subject to human experience and verification in some way. But that doesn't mean that there's no ultimate truth, right? Human experience in and of itself has to be measured up against some kind of objective truth. Is that a correct characterization of Guissani?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was particularly moved by him when the manner by which words are defined. I mean, reading Guissani is somewhat complicated because words you previously thought you knew are not actually what they mean, right? So the word reason for Guissani means to face the real, right? To be rational is to face reality as it is, and reality comes at us in different ways. And it's appropriate to employ a scientific methodology when you're trying to determine the interrelationship between an acid and a base. The thing itself has told you how to use it. But it's different, for example, than if you try to do that and then move to poetry or to move to love, right? It would be odd if I, as a husband, went home to my wife and tried to measure or assess or turn our relationship into a project. Right? There's something else. It would be irrational to do so. So the reason is I have to face this properly according to reason. And so too then, can we understand religion then within that mode, that there's a rational way of facing up to religion. And there is the task of appropriation, the task of taking something on for ourselves. As I remind the students I teach when I do this, if you walk into a class and you're charged with teaching the incarnation, you can't, when you propose that, the student has to think along with you with that. They have to understand along with, they have to actually give themselves to that. And that's true, in religion or otherwise. Anyone who's taught literature knows that when you propose, like, this book is extraordinary, it will transform your life, the risk is that task in which the student actually has to perform along with you, think through with you. But that doesn't mean that then you employ the scientific method upon that and say, okay, well, that's the best way to teach this book. And so what I found for Guissani was a freedom to actually propose and to propose a way of rationality that didn't eliminate mystery.
Mhm. I've been teaching the risk of education in the seminar that I teach on liberal arts education. And the very first thing you said resonated with one of my students. I wrote about this in an article on how Guissani uses tradition and authority in education. One of my students, after she read Risk of Education, she said, Luigi Guissani uses common words in uncommon ways. That's really strange, but also very compelling. And I think what she was saying was precisely like you said, Guissani, in a lot of his writings, he's doing very deep philosophical and theological work. And I think what's often not understood about Guissani is what a brilliant philosopher and theologian he was. Because he was a Catholic priest and he was teaching theology at the university, first at the seminary in Italy, and then he switched to a high school, and he ended up founding the movement of communion and liberation. And he spent most of his life as the head of this movement. But he easily could have written books on theology and philosophy, but instead, most of his writings have come to us, at least those in English, have been translations of pastoral talks that he gave. So in those talks, he's not saying, now I'm critiquing the Hegelian view of history, and here I'm drawing on Augustine, and here I'm using von Balthasar. He doesn't exactly do that, but for me, I could see what he was doing. So in the way Guissani's using reason is exactly critiquing the whole modern turn, which has made reason synonymous with the scientific method, and anything about faith, by definition, unreasonable or an illusion.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
that's one key word, reason, for him. And so reason for Guissani, can you tell us again, for, as you said, reason for Guissani is anything that helps us understand reality, correct?
Yeah, it's the proper way of facing what's real. It's reasonable to, it's reasonable for me to go home and presume that my spouse loves me based upon the years that we've spent together, the years that we have, what we've endured, especially over the last 8 weeks with 2 children at home. It's reasonable to presume this, and love has this own kind of reason. It's not irrational. Like, I'm not tossed in some sort of like a Kierkegaardian throwing myself without reason into every relationship, this jump into this dark abyss. It's a reason, but it's a reason that is appropriate to the thing that is being looked at, the thing that I'm trying to understand, that bestows itself to me. The thing that I look at gives me the method I should use. Method isn't something I implant upon reality and employ universally. That erases all of the world. That tries to over-rationalize, in a bad sense, the world. The world itself gives me the method to understand it if I'm attentive to that. And that is very attractive when you think about the different ways of teaching in a classroom, whether you're teaching religion or you're teaching philosophy or you're teaching science. The thing is telling you the way to engage with it if you're attentive to the thing.